Wow, it looks even better than the photos.
It looks expensive. They always talk about how we're best friends. Best friends do this, best friends do that, but I don't want to be best friends, Jill.
You don't like me?
No. The problem is I like you too much. I fell in love with you the first time I laid eyes on you. I was hoping you felt the same.
Talk to me. Help me understand you.
I remember the first time I met Taylor. It was after class in the hallway. Like a cheesy rom-com, I dropped my books and no one noticed. I was invisible. But then I look up, someone is helping me. She was beautiful. I even remember her smell, like lavender. How could I forget? A fire was lit in me. She was all I could think about. All I wanted was to spend every waking moment with her. And in a way, my dreams came true.
This third film in the sequence reframes queer longing through the lens of generosity, care, and class vulnerability, offering a deeply resonant portrait of how love between women is so often disguised as caretaking until it becomes impossible to ignore. And in doing so, it speaks directly to queer audiences who have learned to translate desire into service because that was the safest language available. From the moment Jillian brings Darla into a space that feels too expensive, the film establishes an emotional imbalance that has nothing to do with affection and everything to do with power, self-worth, and who feels entitled to pleasure. Darla's discomfort is not ingratitude but habituation, the learned instinct of someone who has spent her life prioritizing others' needs over her own and who now finds the sudden focus on her happiness both touching and destabilizing. Jillian's insistence, no questions about money, no unpacking, no responsibility, reads at first as playful dominance. But the film carefully repositions it as something more fragile, an attempt to orchestrate joy for someone who does not believe she deserves it. And in that effort, we see a common queer dynamic where love is expressed not through declaration but through provision, planning, and protection. Their banter about vacation rituals, about doing nothing versus doing everything, becomes a subtle negotiation of identity. Jillian is the woman who has learned to move through the world with ease, who understands pleasure as something to be claimed, while Darla is the woman who has learned that ease must be earned, justified, or deferred. And this contrast is not merely personal but deeply gendered and cultural, reflecting how women, particularly Black women, are often taught that rest and indulgence are luxuries they cannot afford. The film is careful not to caricature either position. Instead, it allows the tension to build organically until the language of friendship begins to strain under the weight of what has been left unsaid. Jillian's repeated invocation of best friends functions as both shield and invitation, a socially sanctioned container for intimacy that allows her to be close to Darla without risking rejection, while Darla's discomfort with the transactional framing, her sense that this generosity feels like repayment, reveals how care, when not freely received, can feel like debt rather than love. This is a dynamic many queer women will recognize, the fear that accepting too much affection will obligate one to reciprocate in ways they are not allowed or ready to name, and the parallel fear that offering too much will expose feelings that have been carefully buried to preserve the relationship as it is. When Darla finally interrupts the script, stating plainly that she does not want to be best friends, the film reaches its emotional turning point, and the silence that follows is charged not with shock but with recognition, as if both women have been waiting for this rupture without knowing how to initiate it. Darla's confession, "The problem is I like you too much," is devastating in its simplicity, articulating a truth that queer audiences understand instinctively, that the greatest threat to a friendship is not desire itself, but the inability to speak it, and that unspoken love corrodes connection far more quietly than rejection ever could. Her admission that she fell in love at first sight situates this story within a lineage of queer narratives where love is immediate but unacknowledged, not because it lacks legitimacy, but because the world has provided no safe framework for its expression. And her question, "Why didn't you say anything?" invites reflection not only on Jillian's silence, but on the cultural conditions that make such silence feel necessary. Jillian's response, that it never felt right, encapsulates a lifetime of hesitation condensed into a single phrase, suggesting timing, fear, and self-doubt without spelling them out. And the film honors this ambiguity rather than demanding explanation. recognizing that queer women are often forced to intuit each other's limits rather than articulate their own. The moment where Darla prepares to leave is not framed as melodrama but as self-preservation, a reminder that naming one's feelings does not obligate one to remain exposed in the aftermath. And Jillian's plea, simple urgent, marks the first time she allows herself to ask rather than provide, to risk vulnerability instead of control. The letters she reveals become the film's most potent symbol, tangible evidence of love deferred, rehearsed, and rewritten over time. And their existence speaks volumes about how queer women often process desire privately, drafting versions of truth that may never be delivered, practicing honesty in solitude because the world has taught them that saying too much out loud is dangerous. Darla's response to these letters, calling them the most beautiful thing she has ever read, is not merely romantic but affirming, validating Jillian's emotional labor and reframing her silence not as indifference but as fear, and this mutual recognition allows the scene to shift from imbalance to reciprocity. Importantly, the film resists the temptation to resolve this confession through immediate physicality. Instead, it lingers on conversation, on the difficulty of speaking, on the acknowledgement that words themselves can be a form of exposure. And this restraint reinforces the film's commitment to emotional authenticity over spectacle. For queer viewers, especially those who have loved Friends quietly for years, this story resonates as both cathartic and unsettling, mirroring the lived experience of navigating closeness without clarity and the profound relief that comes when ambiguity is finally replaced with truth, even if that truth is messy or incomplete. On a broader level, the film interrogates society's discomfort with women expressing love for each other by showing how that discomfort is internalized, transforming desire into generosity, romance into caretaking, and longing into self-denial. And it suggests that this persistence is rooted in a cultural framework that values women's nurturing qualities only when they are directed toward others, rather than claimed for themselves. Jillian's role as provider and Darla's role as recipient echo traditional gendered scripts. Yet the film subverts these scripts by exposing the emotional costs they impose, revealing how even well-intentioned care can obscure genuine intimacy if it is not accompanied by honesty. In centering Black women, the narrative adds layers of significance around respectability, self-sacrifice, and the pressure to appear strong and self-sufficient, highlighting how these expectations can make vulnerability feel like failure rather than courage. Darla's reluctance to indulge, to accept joy without justification, reflects a broader social message that Black women must earn rest and pleasure, while Jillian's desire to create happy Darla underscores a longing not just for romance but for the freedom to imagine a future unburdened by constant resilience. The film does not present their love as a solution to systemic pressures, but it does suggest that choosing visibility, choosing to speak love aloud, can be an act of resistance, a refusal to let fear dictate the terms of one's relationships. For women watching, queer or otherwise, this story offers a mirror for examining how often they have minimized their own needs to preserve harmony, how often they have confused being needed with being loved, and how transformative it can be to name what one wants without apology. Ultimately, this film asserts that queer love is not defined by grand gestures or dramatic conflict, but by the quiet bravery of telling the truth, by the willingness to risk change for the sake of authenticity, and by the recognition that becoming visible does not require permission, only honesty. In presenting Jillian and Darla's connection with patience, tenderness, and respect, the film invites viewers to see themselves not as deviations from the norm, but as participants in a long tradition of women finding each other, loving each other, and learning, sometimes slowly, sometimes painfully, that their feelings are not too much, too soon, or too inconvenient to deserve a place in the light.